5 Live Formula One.
Formula One arrives in Montreal for round 9 of the championship. The circuit Gilles Villeneuve plays host for the 43rd time, and we find ourselves on the man-made Ile Notre Dame Island in the St. Lawrence River. After a jaunt in Europe, we hop over to Canada, where the weather has not greeted us with open arms. It is grey and wet. In fact, storms expected across the weekend, and just a couple of hours ago, hail hammering down across the circuit and paddock. But to describe all of the action for you today and across the weekend is myself, Harry Benjamin. Joining me is the BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson and Autosport editor-in-chief Rebecca Clancy. Welcome, Rebecca. First visit to the 5 Live commentary box this weekend, this year I should say. Thoughts on Canada? Enjoy the place?
It's a personal favourite for me, yeah. Absolutely love Montreal. I think it's a favourite for all of us. The drivers certainly love it. Nico Hülkenberg was talking yesterday. He said it was his absolute favourite track of the year. And I think we all feel quite similarly about it. We have the Wall of Champions. No one is forgiven for a mistake here. It has seen the very best that we have in F1 make mistakes, claimed many a prisoner, and it just leads itself to very good racing, which, quite frankly, after Monaco, I think we all need it.
I think we will be desperate for it come Sunday. Andrew, now, I've mentioned the weather is not the best. What is the update that we have at the moment in terms of running for FP1?
Well, in a very FIA type of message, they said that the session will start on time, but the pit exit will remain closed. So, in other words, the session won't start on time, and that's because they're clearing water from the track. Why not just say the sessions? I mean, it's because they want to stick to the timetable, basically, but it's just all they tie themselves in knots with these sorts of things. I have to say, you haven't asked me for my opinion on Canada, Harry, but I'm a little bit more ambivalent than Beck. I used to love this race. It used to be like one of my top 3, but it's become a real logistical headache. And you get a sense, I was talking to some people earlier this week about Canada, and I know that Formula One themselves are not happy about the way that the organisation hasn't kept up with the times, and I believe that the organisers may have a rather unpleasant meeting with Stefano Domenicali, the F1 president, this weekend because of that.
Well, talk of logistical nightmares. If you're wondering where our pit reporter Rosanna Tennant is, well, she was held up in traffic getting into the circuit because of the poor weather. They actually stopped people coming onto the island and were evacuating people off of it due to the high winds and just the terrible storm-like weather. We last heard from her. She's on the move, finally. She's coming into the paddock, so we'll hear from her hopefully before the end of FP1 and her adventure that she's been on this morning. Trust me, it will be worth the wait. In the meantime, though, let's just bring you up to speed with the drivers and teams standings. Max Verstappen leads the championship with 169 points to his name, but only 31 points clear now of Charles Leclerc, who lies in second. Norris, Sainz, Perez are the top 5. Then over in the Constructors' Championship, Red Bull lead the way with 276 points, but they are only 24 points clear of Ferrari. Then it's McLaren, Mercedes and Aston Martin, the top 5. RB heading up the second half of the field in front of Haas. Then it's Williams, Alpine now with 2 points, and Sauber 10th and last. Still the only team yet to get off the mark as we are now this weekend. 9 will be 9 races in. And actually, there's been a lot to talk about over the last couple of weeks since Monaco, as the track is being swept with debris that has fallen onto it from the leaves that overhang this circuit, and the rain drainers are out there as well. There's a couple of big puddles that have been developing, particularly on the inside of turn 5, so they'll want to make sure that they are drained adequately enough for those. But one of the big bits of news coming in this weekend from the FIA is they have officially revealed their 2026 car plans. That is the next big regulation change. And I suppose the bottom line is we're getting smaller, nimbler cars, Beck. And what is this going forward? What are we expecting from 2026? What have they outlined for us?
Well, as you say, these lighter cars, it's supposed to create better racing. Just on this one, the thing that really made me laugh, all the drivers were talking yesterday, obviously asking them their opinions on these new regs that the FIA have released. And I feel like, Andrew, you might feel the same. For years, the drivers have been begging for lighter cars, more nimble cars. And the first thing they all did yesterday was complain about the new regs.
Well, as Lewis Hamilton put it, it's only 30 kilograms, and 30 kilograms out of 798 kilograms, which is the minimum weight limit at the moment. It's not a huge percentage. I think it's, what is that, 5% or something? Or is it even less than that?
But it's in the right direction, at least.
It's in the right direction, but it's... and I mean, look, the bottom line is the cars have got heavy because of safety, and they've got big because of performance. The bigger they are, the more surfaces they have to create downforce, and that's what's happened. These regulations are an interesting one. There are big changes. Just to be clear about the reduction in size of the cars, it's a 10 centimetre overall width reduction, so from 2 metres down to 1.9 metres. And the wheels are going to be, the tyres I should say, are going to be made narrower, although they're sticking with the 18-inch wheels, which were introduced a couple of years ago. Those, by the way, are also guilty of raising the weight of the cars, because obviously an 18-inch wheel weighs more than a 13-inch wheel. There was some talk about reducing the size of the wheels to 16-inch diameter, but Pirelli vetoed that. Don't get me started on Pirelli and tyre heating and all the rest of it.
Well, we've got 58 minutes, so we could.
I think these are a very, very complicated set of technical regulation changes, Harry, and there is some concern within Formula One as to whether they've become complex because of some situations that the FIA have kind of created for themselves, and there is concern across both the teams and the drivers as to whether they are going to be holistically a good thing, but I guess we'll find out in 2 years' time.
What actually happens next, though? So this goes through, does it need to be then approved by the World Motorsport Council, and then is it essentially just given to the teams and go, well, there you go, start, have at it?
Well, the teams have been working on the regs with the FIA for some time. So the power unit regulations were introduced a couple of years ago, basically. They were agreed between the FIA, Formula One, and a bunch of car manufacturers around the world. And they've been very successful in terms of not only bringing in two brand new car manufacturers, so Audi and Ford. Audi are coming in full steam with their own team in 26. Ford are joining forces with Red Bull powertrains to create, in terms of badging, sponsoring, giving technical support to their engine. And Honda, who had pulled out of Formula One, were persuaded to stay in, although they're still supplying engines to Red Bull at the moment, but they're persuaded to formally stay in as a result of these engines that are being introduced. Basically, they've simplified them by taking away the MGU-H, which is part of the hybrid system at the moment that recovers energy from the turbo. But that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It reduces cost and complexity, but it also reduces efficiency. But at the same time, they've increased the electrical capacity of the power unit by threefold. So then they've had to find a way to recover the energy that they've reduced the ability to do so by taking away the MGU-H, and that created a whole set of problems, because what was happening was that they needed to find a way to increase braking distances, because that's the only way to recover energy, and that meant that they had to come up with this complicated way of using movable aerodynamics. So both the front wing and the rear wing will effectively be like the current DRS. So they'll have downforce in the corners, then both wings will open on the straight. That will increase top speed and increase braking distances, and that allows them to recover sufficient energy to...
X-mode.
Yeah, exactly, as they've called it. All these stupid acronyms
and Z-mode.
Titles and what have you. That gives them enough energy to recover to make the engines about the same power output as now, but we don't know how the sort of recovery strategy is going to work in races. DRS has gone as a result of this, and they're going to use but still will have an overtaking boost button, but that'll be electrical energy rather than aerodynamically led, and that's the regulations in a nutshell. And they, we've heard this before, better racing, they said that for 22 and that didn't really work out. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding with these regulations when they're introduced in a couple of years' time.
Just to let you know, the session has started. Clock is counting down, but the pit exit is closed while we continue to work on the track to make sure it is dry enough and clear enough to get cars out there. But a couple of drivers getting strapped into the cockpits of their cars. Logan Sargent in the Williams, Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes as well, just gearing up. But still, Marshall's out on track, sweeping as much of the water as they can away and trying to drain it off of the circuit. Beck, just coming back to the FIA regs for 2026, I mean, you can get excited by a different looking car, nimbler, maybe more ragged as well, because they're slightly smaller, but in a time where, and we've seen this over the years, and we're seeing it now, teams are starting to converge. The longer we stay in a regulation cycle, it's going to get more and more competitive. People are starting to catch up to Red Bull. So is there not a bit of an argument to say, why don't we just stick with what we've got? Because, in personal opinion, I don't really care what the car looks like or does. If the racing's good, I think we forget about all the rest.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And let's be honest, if you haven't seen the car, don't worry about it. It sort of looks like the current one. It's not wildly different, is it? I mean, you're not going to be able to see 10 centimetres to the naked eye, let's be honest. And you certainly won't be able to tell any difference just by looking at it, that it's 30 kilos lighter. Yes, there's absolutely an argument for just leaving the regulations alone. We're seeing it now. You mentioned earlier, Ferrari's just 24 points behind Red Bull. You know, at the start of this year, we all thought Red Bull would be dominant as they were last year. We thought possibly even more dominant than they were. Thankfully, we've all been wrong, and they haven't won every single race. It has been more competitive. But I think they're doing it for the right reasons. They have this goal of sustainability, of net zero by 2030, I think it is. They like to be seen to be doing things. Sometimes it feels like a little bit. But they also, with these power units that Andrew was touching on, they are desperate to get more manufacturers in, and it's why, you know, they convinced Ford to come in with Red Bull. These guys were at the table when they were putting these regulations together. They hadn't signed anything by this point, but F1 and FIA, they were so desperate to get more manufacturers in that everyone's been allowed at the table to have their say. And so it's obviously attractive enough, and we haven't touched on fuel yet. We haven't got the fuel regulations through yet, I don't think. And that's another attractive part for manufacturers, because that very much feeds down into the road car. And so they all want to be seen. And with the growth that F1 has seen in recent years, it's an amazing shop window for these manufacturers. It's absolutely incredible. The reach that you can get every single weekend. I mean, not currently now because nothing's on track, but normally they can reach a global audience the rate we're going with the increase in the calendar, probably every weekend. So it's pretty priceless. It kind of almost pays for itself in that regard.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that this is the second set of engine regulations in which the discussions were open to other manufacturers who weren't in Formula One, and particularly the Volkswagen Group, the company in question. They didn't come in when the engine regulations were introduced in 2014. They decided against it in the end. This time, in theory, once they decided on these engine regulations, which the essence of them is that from a split between sort of power output of 80% internal combustion engine and about 20% electrical energy at the moment, it's going to go to about 50-50, slightly more than 50% for the ICE and slightly less than 50% from the electrical part of the engine. That was enough to persuade both Audi and Porsche, who were both VW Group brands, to come in. Porsche then kind of messed up their situation, or Red Bull messed it up for them, because Red Bull and Porsche were in very close conversations about forming a partnership. And in the end, Christian Horner particularly and Helmut Marko thought that they would be giving up too much control to Porsche if they came in as a works partner. So they cut those talks. So Porsche didn't come in the end. But Audi did come in, and as I said earlier, Red Bull have now gone with Ford. Honda have stayed. So that's, in terms of, sustainability, a 50-50 split between internal combustion power and electrical power is a big message for Formula One in itself, before you even think about using 100% sustainable fuels. So what that means is, this is not from 26, they won't be using what the Americans call gasoline, what we call petrol. The fuel will be it will come from sustainable sources, and there's Formula One have released, not very many people have read it, but I have. Formula One have released a report,
and that's why we don't have to,
from an Oxford academic, which says that, and this is quite remarkable because obviously these fuels still have to be made. He's saying that these sustainable fuels can have a 90%, more than 90% reduction in carbon footprint for full life cycle usage compared to fossil fuels. Now that's incredible, obviously, and now these things aren't commercially available at the moment, but Formula One's position is, hopefully, you've got billions of internal combustion engine cars on the road. It's all very well for a few rich people in Western countries to buy battery-powered cars to reduce their carbon footprint, but globally that doesn't have that big an impact on the climate crisis. If you can increase the number of cars on the roads that are running these sustainable fuels, that could have an absolutely seismic impact on the climate crisis, potentially, because obviously road transport is one of the biggest contributors to carbon emissions. We're not there yet, but that's Formula One's sell for these sustainable fuels, and obviously all the fuel manufacturers have bought into that. You have to be a bit cynical, because obviously one of the fuel manufacturers is Aramco, which is the Saudi Arabian fuel supplier, and we all know from seeing news reports recently that Saudi Arabia as a country is also involved in trying to perpetuate the use of fossil fuels because they're making money from it. But nevertheless, every small amount helps. So that's and Formula One, as the backdrop to this, is trying to establish a goal of net zero by 2030. So this is a big part of that.
Absolutely. So we're trying to find the right balance there to striking those sustainability goals, but also when it comes to the regulations, having cars that can race and create competitive action up and down the field. You just listen to the voice of the BBC F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, alongside myself. Harry Benjamin is also sport editor-in-chief. Rebecca Clancy. It is FP1. Chris has asked on hashtag BBC F1 for a time sync. If you really want one, there's no cars on track, but it's 49 minutes and 10 seconds remain of FP1. The safety car and the medical car are both out on track, just making their way through turns 3 and 4 and approaching the slight right-hander of turn 5, where we last saw a massive puddle just built up on the inside. They have got a team working to drain that puddle, and they think they have done a decent job of what it was, but there are still little rivers running across the track that are, of course, going to cause aquaplaning when the Formula One cars head out there. But the clock is counting down on this session, but the pit exit not open, and it has in the last few moments just started raining again.
The problem with days like this, Harry, is that it's all very well to have a wet Friday, and then if the forecast is for a dry Saturday and Sunday, you may then get the drivers and teams going out and having a bit of a play in the wet. The problem is that this weekend, the entire weekend forecast is changeable weather, and they have limited supply of both wet and intermediate tyres, and obviously they don't want to waste those for no reason in practice when they're going to need them for qualifying and the race. So I think, I hate to say it, but certainly in this first session, I think even if they get the track dry enough for them to want to run on it, there's going to be very minimal running. The second session this afternoon might be a bit different. I think most people will probably go out for at least an exploratory run to get a sense of it, especially because there's a new track surface in Montreal this year. That will be important, but I think we're going to struggle for this hour, and people might just have to listen to us rabbiting on about whatever's going on off the track rather than on it.
I probably shouldn't say this as we're broadcasting live on FP1, but I quite like less practice. It does tend to lead to quite a good race, doesn't it?
Well, this is the argument for sprints, isn't it?
Well, I'm in favour of anything that reduces practice, and I know a lot of people aren't for sprints, but I like that Liberty are trying something new. I like that they're trying to make the action a bit more exciting, even if it's just the first third of a race, which usually isn't outside of the first lap. It just makes it more exciting. The thing with these teams now, and yes, we've been reducing practice down, the sessions are only an hour, they used to be 90 minutes. They are so good at what they do. These cars are so honed, their wind tunnels are amazing, they've got the simulators. They just don't need all this practice time. And I understand from a promoter point of view why they want to get the fans through the door. They want the ticket sales, the money, you drink your beer, you eat your burgers, all that sort of thing. Oh, look.
Plenty of wildlife out on track.
We've got
the groundhogs. I think we also saw there might have been some sort of pigeon or some sort of bird there too. Just having a mosey on the grassy verge that runs on the left-hand side as you head down the back straight towards turns 13 and 14. The quick chicane with the Wall of Champions on the driver's right-hand side, ready to greet you if you put a wheel out of place. So certainly a bit of wildlife, which we've have seen a few skirmishes with, as Bert Mailander in the safety car splashes through a load of water built up right on the inside of the apex through turn 1 and then again in turn 2. You said it off air though, Beck, the thing that's going to clear up the water most is probably Formula One cars running round.
Yeah, this is the thing. As nice as the safety car and medical car are, they aren't going to clear the water. The only thing that's going to get them moving is the actual F1 cars, but as Andrew said, they just don't have the tyres for it. And look, we're just looking at pictures now of Max Verstappen, very comfy in he's got his race suit on, but he's also got his waterproof jacket on top and no helmet, nothing. He's just in his cap. He's not going anywhere, and by the looks of it, he doesn't expect to be going anywhere anytime soon.
Smiling away, laughing with his engineers. 5 sets of intermediate tyres is what they get throughout the weekend. They do also get 2 sets of wets, but very rarely are those used in racing scenario. So that's the situation, whereas they get 2 sets of hards, 3 sets of mediums, 8 sets of softs.
And do you know why the wets aren't used, Harry? Because
they
they're
don't do the
rubbish,
job.
basically, yeah.
I thought you didn't want to get on to Pirelli.
I don't, but I'll just say that.
I'll tell you what we can get on to. While the rain does continue to come down, the session has started. The clock is counting down, but the pit exit is closed while the safety car and medical car make their way around the track. Marshals across the entire track, sweeping away water, trying to drain it. And bless the fans that have come out and are sitting in their grandstands, umbrellas up and full raincoat gear activated. There was a lot of driver news in the last week or so. Shall we start with Red Bull and Sergio Perez, who has secured a contract extension through till 2026. And Andrew, you've been saying this, we've been discussing it and debating it throughout the season. It was getting more increasingly likely that this was going to happen. It was just a case of signing on the dotted line, which he's now done.
Yeah, he was backed heavily by Christian Horner, the team principal, Perez, and I mean, look, you could argue the obvious contender for that seat was Carlos Sainz, and I think many people in the pit lane think that Carlos Sainz would have been a stronger candidate for that seat than Sergio Perez, but they were teammates before Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz at Toro Rosso in 2015 when they were both rookies, and it led to a very tense situation. Not so much the drivers themselves, although Verstappen's competitive instincts did very much come to the fore in the odd race. People might remember him refusing in Singapore to do what he was told by the team and let Sainz through. It was more to do with the people around them, particularly their fathers, Jos Verstappen and Carlos Sainz Sr. They both the atmosphere just got a bit awkward, and Horner didn't want to go back there. Many people in Formula One, Beck, think that might come back to haunt him, don't they? In the sense that if you've got a car that's half a second a lot quicker than everything else, then Perez is quite capable of finishing second to Max Verstappen. If you've got a car that's not half a second clear of everybody else, then he's not. And that's and if Verstappen ends up in a championship fight with the likes of Charles Leclerc at Ferrari, Lando Norris at McLaren, Oscar Piastri too, and Lewis Hamilton and George Russell at Mercedes, although they look a bit far off at the moment. Is Perez going to give Verstappen the backing? The evidence of last year and this year so far is not. And one of the most striking statistics for me is that last year Max Verstappen won 19 of the 22 Grand Prix. Yes, Perez won 2 of the other 3, but in those 19 wins, Perez only managed to finish second behind him 4 times in the most dominant season by any team in history.
I do not understand the signing of Perez. I do not understand why it was 2 years. It doesn't seem to be 1 + 1. It seems to be a legit 2-year contract. So to put it into context, Max Verstappen is currently leading the driver standings. He's on 169 points. Perez is 5th on 107. 5th in what is the fastest car on the track. Okay, we can talk about Monaco, it wasn't his fault, but you can't keep making excuses for him. It doesn't make any sense. You've already mentioned it, Harry. Ferrari are just 24 points behind, and you know, I've had this conversation with Christian Horner before. All the glory is in the Drivers' Championship. Absolutely, completely understand that. But all the money is in the Constructors. And Red Bull cannot afford to lose that. We saw it in 2021. Everyone remembers the battle between Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. But another major battle was the Mercedes and the Red Bull battle. And Mercedes won that in the end because Valtteri Bottas was a brilliant number 2 driver and was always there and claiming points when he could. And Perez doesn't do that for Red Bull.
Is this Verstappen's been quite supportive of the re-signing of Perez, and you know that's clearly for a reason. He doesn't want to be challenged. He doesn't want, as Andrew was saying, he doesn't want perhaps a Sainz or a Norris who in that second seat could be quite capable. Yeah,
I understand that. He doesn't want the headache of being challenged. He doesn't want a difficult number 2 driver. Perez doesn't rock the boat. He has shown himself to be a team player. He does what he's told. And not forgetting, last year, as Andrew's already mentioned, it was Red Bull's most dominant season. Those 19 victories that Verstappen secured meant that he alone actually won the Constructors' Championship. Maybe Verstappen thinks that he can do it again and that he'll be able to do it for the remaining years. I think his contract's through to 28. and he doesn't actually matter who's the second driver. So as long as his life is easy, and I don't think we should actually underestimate the power that Verstappen has within this team. And so yes, that is probably where I would be thinking that Verstappen's had quite a say, in that he's pretty happy with the other side of the garage. So let's keep that status quo.
Indeed. Bit of good news. The pit exit will open 13:51 local time in about a minute's time. So Nico Hülkenberg in his Haas just gearing up to get into the cockpit, puts one leg in and gets the other one in as well. Helmet done up, adjusts himself and sits down in the seat as he gets ready. So we will get cars on track, and we'll see those first tentative laps, hopefully. Who wants to be brave and go out first and see what the conditions are like? That will be the question. 39 minutes and 28 seconds remain. The other news coming in for this week, Beck, was Esteban Ocon. He and Alpine have announced they are parting ways at the end of this season. It is not punishment for Monaco. It is not. But the timing's interesting.
Well, we're reliably informed by both parties that it was mutual, but I don't think anyone believes that, do they? Obviously, we had the big crash between the two Alpine drivers. Ocon was very much to blame when he launched his car over the top of teammate Gasly. And a few days later, they announced that Ocon would be leaving at the end of this year. And then, a couple of days after that, they announced that Jack Doohan will be standing in for him in this session in FP1. They are trying to tell us, this is Alpine are trying to tell us, that this is not a test. He has actually, Doohan has run in FP1 sessions before, but this is his first outing this year. But he's a favourite for the seat, so he is definitely feeling the pressure when he's going out there, and in these conditions, I mean, rather him than me.
Do you know what's interesting, Beck, I find about this? So signing Gasly to partner Ocon when they hated each other was the sort of like the final one of a series of catastrophically bad driver management decisions by Laurent Rossi, the former CEO of Alpine. The first one was signing Esteban Ocon for a 3-year contract in the first place when he absolutely didn't need to. Obviously, the second one was fumbling the driver market in 2022 and losing not only Fernando Alonso but Oscar Piastri as well. Well done, Laurent. And then the last one was signing Gasly to be teammate to someone he hated alongside him. Now, what's interesting is that if it's true, and I believe I've been hearing similar things as Beck, you know, Doohan's in the frame for the drive. Mick Schumacher, believe it or not, is in the frame for the drive. He races for Alpine as in endurance at the moment. This is Lewis Hamilton leaving the pits in the Mercedes that you can hear in the background as we talk. It seems to me that what they really need in that team is a really proven, solid Formula One driver to give them some kind of sense of really, do we know where we are? Because one of the things they lost when they lost Alonso was that kind of measure for the car. And how much of them not being competitive this year is, we don't know. I'm not saying it necessarily is this, but at least with an Alonso or a Hamilton or a Leclerc or a Verstappen, you know that the driver goes out and he's on the limit all the time. But you would see with Alonso and Ocon when they were teammates together, first practice, Alonso would be half a second quicker very regularly, and it would take, Ocon would get to Alonso's pace in qualifying more often than not, but it would take him the whole weekend to get there. And you have to ask the question, would he have got there without the benchmark set by the other guy in the first place? So if it was me running Alpine, I don't know about you, Beck, I'd be looking at, I mean, no one seems to want to sign Valtteri Bottas at the moment. I don't know why. You know,
no, I agree. I think we'd be a great signing.
He's not an absolute A-list driver, but he did a very solid job alongside Hamilton, beat him fair and square on a few occasions. He's the sort of guy they should be looking at, I think, for that second Alpine, just to give themselves some kind of solidity. Because otherwise, I think they're in danger of continuing this cycle of not really knowing where they are.
You're just hearing Lewis Hamilton, who is the first driver who has dared to go out onto the track on some intermediates, and as he was coming out of the pit lane, which feeds right into turn 2, waving to the grandstand on the exit, and you heard cheers from the crowd. They were cheering Hamilton, giving him a wave. Of course, a track that Hamilton absolutely loves. First pole position, first win here back in 2007 for Lewis Hamilton. And talk of Valtteri Bottas, he has joined his former teammate out on track. He, though, has put on the full wet tyre in his Sauber as he navigates through turn 6 and 7. Hamilton has made it back round and is going for another lap, so he hasn't come straight into the pits. So 35 minutes and 28, 27, 26 remain of FP1, and we've got Hamilton and Bottas out on track. And it's a very good point, Andrew, you make about Bottas not being considered. I've even heard Zhou Guanyu is being considered for the Alpine seat as an outside contender. But what's interesting, to come back to the Alpine saga, I mean, I can't take credit for this, but somebody listed all the people who have either been sacked, moved places, or left the Alpine team. Cyril Abiteboul, Pat Fry. Oh, here's Lewis Hamilton first.
It's very low.
Grip is very low, Lewis Hamilton is saying, on a resurfaced track in the wet. Pat Fry, Marcin Bukowski, Davide Brivio, Alain Prost, Otmar Zafnauer, Alonso, Piastri, Ocon, Alan Permain, Rob Bell, Rob White, Dirk De Beer, Matt Harmon, Daniel Ricciardo. And you think that's a long list? Has that been, over the last sort of 10, 20 years? No, that's in the last 4 years.
In the intro to my story about whatever it was that happened at Alpine most recently, I can't remember what it was, I used the word turmoil. Management turmoil, and I got a phone call from the Alpine press officer saying, what do you mean? What are you trying to say? And that's exactly what I said. I said, in the last year, you've lost a team principal, a sporting director, a technical director, a chief technical officer, an executive engineering consultant, or whatever Bob Bell was called, a head of aerodynamics. This is what turmoil literally is, and okay, I think his point was they're trying to make changes. The team isn't in the place they want it to be, and all of those people were at the team and they led up to the point where they are now, which is fair enough. They are trying to make changes, but if you get rid of that many senior respected people, all of whom, by the way, are going to get jobs somewhere else, so they're obviously not idiots. Alan Permain, who was considered not good enough as sporting director, has got a job as racing director at RB and moving back to engineering, for example. Matt Harmon, I don't know where he's going, the former technical director, he's going to get a job. Here's Bottas's radio.
Yeah, I think we can do inters.
Yeah,
okay. Okay, copy.
The drivers always want to get onto the inters as soon as possible because the wets basically don't have enough, don't provide enough grip. And Bob Bell, who resigned from his position as engineering consultant, he's gone to Aston Martin. He's extremely well regarded in the pit lane. So they've lost a lot of good people, and so it's fine to say they're restructuring the team, and they probably do need to, but they also have to look at why most of these people have resigned, not been fired. I think they have to look at themselves and ask, why are these quality people resigning from that team?
It's not exactly going to attract a top driver, is it? I mean, if you're Bottas, would you go there? It's a mess, isn't it? You look at who's available. You've got Carlos Sainz, Bottas, Kevin Magnussen, Logan Sargent. Obviously, no one's signing him. Ocon, we've just mentioned, and Zhou Guanyu.
Well, someone will go there because otherwise they'll be out of a seat. That's what it boils down to. And if you were Bottas, then I guess if you were going to lose your driving Formula 1, you probably would take the Alpine seat. But you are right; it would be right down the bottom of your list of choices. And it's not a great place for it's a car manufacturer team. It's Renault. Renault have a very storied history in Formula 1, and they've got themselves into a very, very difficult situation. And at the moment, I think it's hard to see how they're going to get themselves out of it that easily. Although they have signed David Sanchez, who's from Ferrari, stroke McLaren, who's a very, very highly regarded technical director.
It's an ongoing discussion, and we'll continue it with the additional voice, I'm very pleased to say, to bring in our pit lane reporter, Rosanna Tennant. You made it.
Oh, bonjour everybody. Yeah, sorry, as my mum said, the party doesn't start till you get there, so here I am. The party can start now, guys. So
well, this is perfect timing because the car's only been out on track for a few minutes.
Well, I am the pit lane reporter. There was nothing to report on apart from the fact that the pit exit was flooded, so I thought I'd just cool my jets and wait until we saw cars out there in anger.
Absolutely. Well, go on. What was your journey in? Talk us through it.
Well, it was all going well. I prepared nicely. I'd been to the gym this morning, had a healthy breakfast. I thought I'd get in with plenty of time to mooch around the paddock, see what was going on, and then wham, bam, I was stationary on my way onto the Ile Notre Dame, and a lovely policewoman came up to me and informed me what was going on. They'd actually shut the island and were evacuating people off it because of this huge storm that we've had here. Hailstones, wind, honestly, unbelievable. The car was shaking beneath me, my little hire car. I was hoping we were both going to withstand it. Puddles forming, lots of flooding. So the organisers, who I've just spoken to actually, Sandrine.
Okay, so far, I think it's going to dry very quickly.
Copy.
Piastri just saying grip feels okay so far. I think it's going to dry very quickly. So a lot of cars are going out on track at the moment. Bottas is out there. Joe, Magnussen, Piastri, Verstappen, Doohan. Actually, Doohan's just coming to the pits. Sargent and Albon all out on track at the moment, Rosanna.
Yeah, that obviously wasn't Sandrine, that was Oscar Piastri. But Sandrine, one of the organisers here at the Canadian Grand Prix, said that they had to remove everybody from the metal grandstands because there was thunder and lightning. So obviously for the safety of everybody, they got them off the grandstands, got people off the island because they could manage the flow of people that they already had. They didn't want any extra. Then luckily, after about an hour stationary, there went my mooch around the paddock. I was allowed to get going, and with that, a lot of fans also being let back onto the island with about sort of 10 minutes to go until the start of the session. I rushed to get my tabard, rushed to get my kit. Here I am with you now with my sunglasses on. Honestly, you couldn't make it up. Blue sky above me, a few clouds here and there, but I've just had a look at the weather forecast and it's due to rain again. Well, 35% chance, so I'm not sure how probable that is, at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So more rain coming our way. Not sure it'll be as intense as we've had, and hailstones. I mean, it's June, for goodness sake. What is going on? But hey, look, it's made for some potentially more exciting action this weekend with less practice time for the drivers.
I hope you brought a packer, Mac. Andrew?
Well, she says it's June. You say it's June, Rosanna, but a couple of years ago, my flight to Montreal was quite badly delayed when it was also June. There was such a bad storm. We had to circle for a while above Nova Scotia, and we ended up getting diverted to Boston to refuel the plane. And it took me 14 hours to get to Montreal from London that day. So it's when the weather turns in Montreal, because of the continental climate there, you get weather coming down from the Arctic. It can be, even in June, it can be really, really cold. And Beck's agreeing with me here. So this is just one of those days, I'm afraid, Rosanna.
I remember a few years ago being in the media centre and the rain.
Oh, sorry, Beck, just to interrupt. We've got a Sauber of Zhou Guanyu peeling off. He's come to blows somewhere. He's had to stop on the exit. He's in sector 2. I think he's at turn 6, and he's just pulled off the road, and it looks like the wheels have hit the wall somewhere. So he's come through the right-hander of turn 5. That's brought out a red flag. So Zhou in the Sauber has stopped. Red flag. Clock continues to count down. Everybody else will make their way back to the pits. Haven't quite seen what happened to Zhou. I'm sure we will momentarily, but I wonder if he's had some incident with the wall. His teammate Valtteri Bottas currently fastest with a 1:33.215. Then it's Hamilton and Verstappen, the three drivers who have set a lap time, all on the intermediate tyres after a delayed start. Well, actually, we started on time, but the pit exit was closed while work was done on the track to try and drain it from all the water. The car doesn't look like it's taken a big shunt in a particular area, but we'll have to wait and see on the replay. And we have just seen also Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, both ragging their cars coming into the hairpin. Norris going deep into the corner. Here we go. So we're about to see what happened. So this is much earlier in the lap we're seeing. Comes through the final chicane to start the lap, and the rear end just steps out, but that's not the issue. And does he just have a touch with the wall? That's we're not seeing the right replay. Here we go. Okay, on board with Zhou Guanyu, and he loses it coming into the right-hander of turn 5. A little bit of aquaplaning, hits the left-hand side wall, and that bends the steering and the suspension. Let's hear from him. He's saying, yeah, I lost a little bit of the car, which he did, coming through that right-hander, and just scraped the outside wall. That's done damage to both the rear left and the front right tyre, bending the wrong way. But Zhou climbs out of the car, but not how he would have wanted to start his Canadian Grand Prix. Zhou Guanyu, a man who is very much trying to find a seat for next season, trying to keep his seat in Sauber, but we do believe that will be a whole new lineup, yet to out-qualify his teammate Valtteri Bottas, but the Marshals already doing a great job in getting the tractor to remove the stricken Sauber straight away. 25 minutes and 36 seconds remain. Rosanna, if you're still there.
Of course I am, Harry.
if you haven't gone back.
I've got to make up for lost time.
That's true. We need to get your
twice
airtime.
as much now.
Well, producer Joe informed me you wanted to pipe in with something about Alpine while we were on the subject.
Well, actually, yeah, you're right. I've just walked past the Alpine pit area. Now I'm walking past the Aston Martin area. And the mechanics are very busy drying the pit boxes with their leaf blowers. You'll normally see them use those leaf blowers to cool the tyres and the brakes when the cars come in from a hot lap or just around the lap, whatever they are doing on their run plan. But the mechanics are now using those leaf blowers to dry the pit boxes. So it's very wet down here in the pit lane. Quite a few puddles here and there, but they're doing their best to make sure the area where the drivers come into is nice and dry. And as I'm looking across the pit lane, then of course the start-finish straight, there are fans in the grandstand, so they're making their way back to the metal grandstands. If you were listening just earlier, they evacuated the metal grandstands earlier on because we had a huge storm here in Montreal, thunder and lightning, so for everyone's safety they were cleared from there. But they are back now, and people settling in, hoping to see some action. And it is now lovely and warm down here. Sunglasses on, I'm starting to get a little hot and sweaty in my Mac. But look, I'm enjoying it. This is what I've come for. Pit lane reporter, I am here now.
You wouldn't know there was a storm, would you? Just hours ago, blue skies, no. Sunshine. It's delightful over the Ile Notre Dame as Zhou Guanyu hops onto a motorbike and gets escorted back to the paddock. Back to Alpine, and just to sort of round off that discussion, Beck, where does Ocon go? Where do you see his place next season?
I mean, I think he might be in danger of not having a drive next season. There have been links with Haas, but he's not going to like me saying this. I'm pretty sure he's not listening, so it's okay. He can be a difficult teammate. When Gasly joined, Andrew mentioned it, they didn't get on, and that stems back to their go-karting days. Ocon has basically managed to fall out with everyone, hasn't he, Andrew? I think pretty much. He's nodding at me. And I just don't know where he goes. What do you think, Andrew?
I honestly don't know. I mean, there's not that many seats left, are there? There's one Williams seat, there's two Haas seats, there's one Sauber/Audi seat, and
a Mercedes,
RB.
technically.
Yeah, he's not going to go to Mercedes. I mean, he is managed by Toto Wolff, but I think his chances of going to Mercedes... Oh, he's not. Beck's wagging a finger at me. He's not managed by Toto Wolff anymore.
I don't think he is since he went to Alpine.
No, I think he is.
I think Wolff
Toto's
has
been talking
taken
about
a step back. I think he's still... I think the overarching management team is still run with Wolff, but he doesn't have the day-to-day operations.
He ain't getting that seat. So it's one of those three seats at the back of the grid, because I think RB drive... I mean, there is still RB to be in question, but that's going to be perming 2 from 3 of Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson and Daniel Ricciardo, I think. So it's basically one Williams, one Sauber, or one of 2 Haas seats. But we don't think it's 2 seats. We think it's only one Haas seat, because Ollie Behrman's going to get one of those at the behest of Ferrari. So 3 seats, and you've got Magnussen, you've got Ocon, you've got Bottas. I think Joe's going to be out of Formula 1. He's having a really terrible season. And then you've got people on the fringes like Doohan, for example. Mick Schumacher's still dreaming of an F1 seat. I can't really think anybody's going to give him a drive. So there is a real chance, Beck, isn't there, that Ocon will not get a seat in Formula 1.
Andrew?
Yes, Rosanna?
I have to disagree, because Esteban Ocon himself told me he has a seat for next year.
Did he? Did he tell you which it was?
On the
Did
sidelines.
Law tell me what it was? No. Yeah, exactly. On the pit wall. No, he said he had one. And he got a bit embarrassed because I think he felt I caught him out. I was the last person to speak to him in the media scrum yesterday, and by which point I think he was so tired he let it slip. So he did tell me he had a seat on the grid. And I have to go back to you explaining the story where you were called up by Alpine to explain why you'd used the word turmoil. Thanks for not giving me a heads up. I used that word with Esteban yesterday. I asked him if it was actually and I actually saw his press girl writing it down on her phone. And I said,
I did
is it a relief?
I'm sure I won the argument. You know, I think if he looks up turmoil in the English dictionary, he'll see that I was right, not him.
It says Alpine as a definition?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Well, no, honestly, I said, are you actually relieved that you're leaving because of the inner turmoil going on? And he just said it was a good time. So, yeah, interesting scenes.
Well, five-year stint with the team as well. That is a long stint in modern Formula One. Seeing it through from Renault into Alpine. You would have heard cars back on track. Green light at the end of the pit lane as Zhou Guanyu's stricken Sauber has been removed. And on the exit of turn 5 into turn 6. And we've got cars back out on track in the form of Hamilton, Verstappen, Magnussen, Russell, Leclerc, Sainz, Tsunoda, Gasly, Perez, Ricciardo, all out on track. Max Verstappen just making his way into the right-hander of turn 3 and 4 and approaching the scene where Zhou Guanyu, I think, just hit a little bit of still water, and that was enough to send his Sauber into the wall. No such drama for Max Verstappen, although as he comes through turn 6 and 7 just gets a little twitch on the front end, but the sunshine already now out, white puffy clouds surrounding the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and the track noticeably drying up from the beginning of the session, although as soon as you dip a wheel onto the red and white curbs or the rumble strips or off that racing line, you suddenly find yourselves kicking up the spray. So the Red Bull lineup is sorted for next year. We mentioned Yuki Tsunoda, who's been having a great year, but there's been no rumblings at all that Red Bull consider him for promotion, and that has bared fruit. But you can't deny he's having a good season. My question is, if he wants to go elsewhere, you know, why do Red Bull cage him in like this?
Well, I'm just going to actually just bring it back to Ocon for a second. So what he said to Rosanna was, I will be driving somewhere else next year. Now, he didn't say it was in Formula One. I'll just throw that out there. But anyway, so Tsunoda, yeah, look, we've been over this before, haven't we, for regular listeners? I apologise if I'm going to say the same thing. Bottom line is the Red Bull management don't rate him that highly.
So why keep him?
Well, because of Honda, basically. That doesn't bode well for a seat in Red Bull, and obviously he's not going to get one for the next 2 years because they've just given Perez a contract. Then he has to think about his Formula One career, and he's been talking to other teams. But I think the problem with Tsunoda is sometimes he drives really, really well, and sometimes he doesn't. And he's going to have to show more consistency at the really well level for other teams to really be looking at him as an alternative to the likes of Ocon, for example, or Bottas, or Hülkenberg, or who all perform pretty consistently at a very high level.
There was some murmuring earlier in the week, wasn't there, Monday time, where the Tsunoda announcement was going to be made and that he would be staying with RB next year, and then that very quickly got shut down. And then obviously we had the Perez announcement at Red Bull instead. So, go on, Andrew, you're very excitedly jumping in.
No, you carry on, then I'll say.
Oh, and I was just going to wonder.
You'll get used to that. He does it all the time. Yeah.
I've known him long enough, don't worry about that.
I didn't jump in, I just pushed my button.
You leaped out, you're a jack in the box. Yeah, so, you know, if RB signs Tsunoda, you can completely understand at the Honda connection, it makes sense. Obviously, the Perez announcement was going to overshadow it, so perhaps they decided from a PR point of view to push it back. I can understand why that would work. But Ricciardo, Lawson, I feel like Lawson deserves a drive.
I would agree with that.
So this is what I was going to say. There's a really interesting political situation developing at RB/Red Bull, because Daniel Ricciardo, who is not performing, is Christian Horner's kind of pet project, and he obviously wants to keep Ricciardo in that seat as a result of that, and he doesn't want to admit that he's got it wrong by bringing him back to Formula One. But he's not become, there's no evidence at the moment that Ricciardo's become the sort of Red Bull Renault Ricciardo as opposed to the McLaren Ricciardo. While Liam Lawson is Helmut Marko's guy. Marko wants Lawson in the car. The problem is that Marko has kind of lost a lot of power as a result of the internal civil war that was laid bare following the allegations that were made against Horner by a female employee of sexual harassment and coercive controlling behaviour, which Horner denies. So that's playing in the background while they decide what they're going to do perming 2 from 3 for that RB team for next year.
16 minutes and 5 seconds remain of FP1, and Carlos Sainz is on course for a decent lap in his Ferrari, comes to the line and goes fastest, a 1:27.4. It's a Ferrari 1-2 at the moment. Rosanna Leclerc just over half a tenth behind.
Yeah, looking strong, as I think we thought they might be this weekend, with Charles Leclerc telling me yesterday that this weekend was an opportunity for them, another opportunity. I have to say, guys, I've just watched a pretty tricky moment for Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. Very narrow pit lane here, and as he was trying to get out, his mechanic was having to say stop, because he's about to take his front end plate off. It's slightly wider, the angle that, as you can hear, Lance Stroll has to take, so he was all right. But yeah, very, very tight for Fernando Alonso, almost coming a cropper. Luckily his mechanic was there to save him.
Still no time on the board for Fernando Alonso yet, as well, we were talking RB. Daniel Ricciardo slots into third ahead of his teammate Tsunoda. Magnussen is the top 5, Hamilton, Perez, Russell, Gasly, Bottas the top 10, and Verstappen 11th at the moment, but the track time improving with every single lap. Fernando Alonso just coming into the braking zone of the hairpin. Let's leave the driver, Marky, because I feel like we could get into that one all day long, and actually time is running away with us. Rosanna brings up the point about Ferrari, of course. Charles Leclerc off the back of an emotional win in Monaco, both Ferrari drivers with wins to their names now, and a championship fight that we perhaps didn't expect. Or Beck, is this a fight now? Can we call it that? Is this game on?
It feels like a fight. The numbers suggest a fight. 24 points behind Ferrari are from Red Bull. I would argue Ferrari have the better driver lineup, the stronger driver lineup. I know that probably sounds a bit bonkers given Red Bull have got Max Verstappen, but all Sainz radio.
Do we expect rain for FP2? Yes, we do expect rain for FP2.
Okay, we better keep back some of our stories then. But I think Ferrari have the more exciting, stronger lineup between the two. You know, you say they've both had a win so far this year. I think we'll probably see both of them win again this year. The Ferrari seem like they've got their momentum going in the right direction. They have a really strong team. Morale seems to be really high. I'm pretty sure Fred Vasseur just skips everywhere in the paddock. Every time you see him, he's smiling, having a joke. It just seems to be a team in a really good place. It has loads of confidence. Those years that we witnessed previously under Mattia Binotto, Vasseur's predecessor, and many team principals before him with Ferrari, where they struggled with strategy, the reliability, the drivers were making mistakes. It was a bad time, and that really does seem to be turning around, and credit, I think, to Fred Vasseur. It's only his second season with the team, and you can see his influence with them already.
Yeah, he's in danger of challenging Andrea Stella at McLaren for sort of team principal of the year, isn't he?
We should definitely do that at the end of the season. We didn't do it last year.
I think I gave it to Stella, didn't I?
Yeah,
unilaterally
unofficially,
last year. But anyway, so I think what's interesting at the moment is we're not quite sure what we're seeing at the moment, are we? What's become apparent is that the Red Bull, it looked like a perfect car for the last 2 years pretty much, but it was also the best car by a mile. But it's now become apparent that it does have some weaknesses in certain situations, and we were seeing them playing out through the last 2 years when the gaps between them and other teams were smaller, such as in Monaco last year when Fernando Alonso nearly beat Verstappen to pole, and had they got their strategy right would have beaten him to the race win. When the gaps went down, we were seeing those weaknesses playing out. We just didn't realise it at the time so much. Now it's become apparent that those weaknesses basically involve curb riding and low-speed corner performance, where those two things put together, it exposes a weakness in the Red Bull car. So, and what's happened is there's been a series of races where curb riding was important. Australia, where they didn't win, and they were being challenged by Ferrari quite closely anyway. Miami, which they didn't win, and then Monaco, where they didn't win. And it's why Leclerc senses an opportunity in Montreal, because as we can see from the TV pictures so far, those of us lucky enough to see them anyway, there's a lot of curb riding involved at Montreal. But there's a whole string of tracks coming up where that's not important. Barcelona, Silverstone, Austria, Hungary, Spa, Zandvoort. he could go and win all of those races, and then the championship changes complexion again. So I think we have to wait and see how that plays out before we decide whether there is actually a title fight, which right now it looks like there might become one. We have to find out.
Well, I had a little look at what the gaps were around this time last year. And between Verstappen and Perez in the driver's title, there were 39 points between the two of them. But more interestingly, in the constructors, Red Bull were ahead of Aston Martin at the time, 129 points ahead of them. When you look at the gap now being 24, that does bode for perhaps not quite the season we thought we were originally signing up for, which is only a good thing, because at the end of the day, I think none of us really care who wins. We just want the fight to be on. That's all we want. And we want the fight to go to the very end. That gets harder and harder the more races you add, of course, per season. But we want a fight to happen. A lot of cars back into the pits at the moment. 10 minutes and 22, 21, 20 seconds remain. Still a couple of bits of standing water out on track, but pretty much every driver navigating that. But now all of them, yes, all of them in the pits. No Zhou Guanyu after he hit the wall coming through turn 5 and had to leave his Sauber with the marshals behind the barriers. I said I would leave the driver chat, but there was one driver I omitted because he's currently fastest with a 1:27.485, Carlos Sainz. With that Red Bull door closed to him, was that his last hope before he sort of looks at, okay, here's my offer from Sauber Audi, here's my offer from Williams, here's my offer from Haas? Was that what he was waiting for that door to be fully closed? And now, where does he go?
Yes, I think he was waiting for it to be closed. I think the Mercedes door, while not officially shut because no one has replaced Hamilton yet, it does look like they're going to go for Antonelli. They are testing him again, although apparently it's not a shootout. So where does Carlos Sainz go? He is very strongly linked to a drive at Williams, but he made it. He was very clear with the media yesterday, wasn't he, Andrew? That he basically, we don't know what we're talking about, even though it's pretty well sourced, that story, it has to be said. Yeah, Carlos Sainz is running out of seats. This Audi deal is really interesting because we keep getting told deadlines for when he has to have signed by, and that deadline has now passed. But apparently the deal is still on the table, which I'm not sure is quite how you want to negotiate things. So I think Carlos may have the stronger hand. Audi seem to quite desperately want him. I think we'll definitely see Carlos Sainz on the grid next year, absolutely no doubt about it. But that Williams link is closer than we all think. And actually, I think just from Sainz' reaction to the media yesterday, I wonder if he is now being nudged back towards Audi.
Well, it's a really interesting scenario on two levels, isn't it? First, or a number of levels maybe. So the first thing is that he gets kicked out of Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton. He's going to end up in a team at the back of the grid. That's going to hurt, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, you would think on paper an Audi factory drive was a no-brainer, right? It's Audi. They've won in absolutely everything they've done in motorsport. This is on paper. But not that many people in Formula One have a great deal of confidence that Audi project is going to be successful anytime soon. And I think that's because, and this is going to sound a bit brutal for any fans of the VW group.
Andrew Benson brutal? What?
They tend to pick championships where the competition's not that strong. You know, World Endurance Championship dominated with Audi, then Bentley, then Audi again, then Porsche. Rallying, they were the main works team in rallying for a long time, won that. They've never come. The depth and intensity of competition in Formula One is like nothing they've ever experienced before. Now, this may be Formula One arrogance coming out, but nevertheless, that's what people in Formula One think, that Audi might have a bit of a rude awakening. And I think even Audi have recalibrated their expectations. They started saying that they were going to win within 3 years as a target. Now they're talking about 5 years. It's all sounding a bit Alpine, isn't it? But anyway, so I think Sainz may be having the same questions, and he might be thinking, well, do I really need to sign up for that? How long is it going to take them to turn Sauber around and make them competitive? He might be thinking, well, I'll go to Williams for a couple of years, and then maybe an Audi drive will still be available then. The thing is that Williams doesn't look that appealing on paper either. So it is a bit of a sort of Hobson's choice. But
he's thinking, right, then surely you're thinking now 2026. We've already discussed the regulation change, what's happening in the cars. Obviously, at the end, the engine is the big factor here. Last time we had a big power unit change, Mercedes were the front runners. Williams were, it was Massa and Bottas, wasn't it, in the car then? And they were flying. They were battling for podiums. At times, they looked like they might even be able to challenge when a Mercedes was having a rough time. So I wonder whether he's seeing that as a bit of a draw towards a Williams. Okay, 2025 might be a bit, okay, let's just play 2025 as it will be. But 2026, if James Vowles really is the dream seller we think he is, that could be what we end up with. That's my reasoning of why I think Sainz might go to Williams. But Rosanna, we've got a Ferrari out on track.
Action in the pit lane. Yes, you've got two Ferraris out on track. Now, Charles Leclerc led the way on fresh, shiny, soft tyres. Then it was Lando Norris in the McLaren, and Carlos Sainz has just joined the party and are being ushered out of the way because Lewis Hamilton has just bolted on his softs, and he's going to be heading out as well. So Mercedes getting ready to join the fray. Let's see what this track's going to be like on soft tyres. Still quite a few puddles as Charles Leclerc headed out. I saw him hit one at the first turn or second turn as I looked down the pit lane. So yeah, it's going to be a bit tricky for them out there.
I think it is, Rosanna. There's definitely a dry line emerged, but there's definitely also some wet patches very close to, and even on it at various points. It'd be quite easy to have an accident, I think, in these next few laps.
And you can see visibly as well on the front tyres of Charles Leclerc, as soon as he dips them into a little bit of damp track, the tyres suddenly darken in colour, quickly drying again. There is a dry line. Lando Norris just tentatively making his way through turns 8 and 9. As soon as you hit the curb, though, on the inside, that is full of water. He's got Verstappen right behind him as they both come into the braking zone for the hairpin. They just about get that all lined up. No running deep. A little bit of flow-vis on the rear wing of Max Verstappen's Red Bull. Rosanna.
Call down to me.
No, I was told to. Sorry, I was told to.
No, you're totally right.
I could leave you be.
No. I'm just going through all the info that I have about tyres because, of course, it's been wet today. We've had the wet running. We've seen the cars out on the wets and the inters. But, of course, now the regulations have changed and they don't get any more tyres, wet tyres, if the rain continues to fall across the weekend. So that is why the teams are having to be careful with how much they use them. And I think it's a bit of a shame. That's what the teams sort of say, that because it kind of limits the amount of running that they get to do if it is wet during free practice. But of course, I think Formula One pushed for that because it's all about sustainability, saving the planet, which is a great thing. But if you're a fan paying good money, you perhaps see a little less action than you might have hoped for. So yes, the number of tyres would sort of reduce throughout the weekend rather than getting any more if the heavens open again. But at the moment, as I look up, I'm being dazzled by the sunshine here. It is nice and warm, nice and sunny. But if I look towards turns 1 and 2 down pit exit way, there are some dark clouds looming. Will they be here during the end of this session? Probably too tight now, but maybe for FP2, and maybe that is why the teams were wondering whether to go out again. But of course, we've now seen them on those soft tyres.
Lando Norris and Max Verstappen also on those soft tyres, absolutely glued to each other out on track. Couple of nervy moments for Lando Norris coming through turn 7. Then it was the short blast out to turns 8 and 9, just twitching the front end of that McLaren. Actually, Verstappen has backed way off of Norris now. He's just coming through the hairpin. But Norris still ploughing on these soft tyres. There is definitely a dry line, but there are some damp bits surrounding that. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc just watching a replay as he enters the braking zone for turn 1 and gets all crossed up and into a little bit of runoff. His tyres soaked with water, picks up the artificial grass to boot, but does manage to rejoin. Little bit of rally craft needed to get him up the hill through turn 2. Sainz is currently faster with just a couple of minutes remaining of FP1. I tell you what, it's also it's a shame for Jack Doohan, who is here in place of Esteban Ocon for free practice 1, the man who finished 3rd in the 2023 Formula 2 Championship, son of the 5-time motorcycle champion Mick Doohan. He's only been out there and done 1 lap on the wets right at the start, so Alpine and Doohan not wanting to risk anything in that car in these tricky conditions, but we should see him reappear hopefully later this season in a couple of FP1 sessions.
On track. He's going out on track.
Oh, he is going out.
He's just left the garage, absolutely. So more track time for Jack Doohan. Such a nice guy, incredibly knowledgeable, speaks very well on camera. I just don't know whether he's going to find himself a seat just yet.
From the Gold Coast in Australia, just 21 years old, makes his way out onto the track, the pit lane exit, feeding you out through turn 2 as he gets onto the throttle tentatively, and he's on the soft tyre, the red wall tyre. He's already made some FP1 appearances with Alpine last year and the year before, actually, both times Mexico City and in Abu Dhabi, and is just off the back of doing a test in a 2-year-old car as well. Bruno Famin, the team principal, very happy with Jack Doohan's progress and very much trying to prove that Alpine junior team does have the makings of the next Formula One driver, but Doohan then will get just enough time for one lap if he gets a hurry on his out lap. But momentary yellow flag for somebody, I think, just running off wide. Green flag for the last few seconds. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton coming into the braking zone for the hairpin at a track, Beck, that for Lewis Hamilton, this is just I've never heard him say a bad word about this track. Obviously history dictates first pole, first win, but he always goes well around here.
He does always go well around here. It's definitely one of his favourite tracks. I think he's got one of his most wins here. Is he up to 7 now? He absolutely adores it. As I said right at the top of the programme, the drivers just love this place. It's a real racers track. They kind of badge it a bit as a street track, permanent circuit. It's around the park, as you say, the Olympic Park. It's next to the rowing lake. It is a firm favourite, and it's funny that we are all talking about the weather and how changeable it is, given we all live in England and we get 4 seasons in a day. But I think that's one of the reasons that we also love this place, because it's so unpredictable.
It certainly is. Checkered flag out though. Lando Norris goes fastest, but time's improving with every sector. It'll be a last over the line situation. If this could be a qualifying session, I think I'd take it with a wet start drying out over time. Let's see how the order changes up. Verstappen pops up into 4th. Leclerc crosses, or Sainz crosses the line. He goes up into 2nd. Leclerc just coming down the back straight now that runs parallel with the rowing lake, or the basin, as apparently is the technical word for it, that runs parallel to the back straight, and Leclerc just backing off. He's got some traffic in front of him in the form of Ricciardo and Tsunoda, so just backs off coming into the chicane as they all feed across the line. Well, we started on time, but there were no cars out on track initially due to the wet weather conditions, but we did get some decent running in the end, and it was Lando Norris who finished fastest, a 1:24 for everyone, or those first 7 on the soft compounder tyre. He's 3/10 clear of Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen the top 5. Then it's Piastri, Gasly, Bottas, Perez and Russell rounding out the top 10. Ricciardo and Tsunoda in 12th. Magnussen and Hülkenberg in 14th. Alonso rounding out the top 15. Sargent, Stroll, Joe, who hit the wall in his Sauber. Then Doohan and Alex Albon, 20th and last.
Thanks very much, Harry. Well, what an interesting session. Very interesting session. I'm looking out over the pit lane, over the starting grid, as the cars line up to do some practice starts. And I can see all the fans now filling the grandstand on their feet, cheering. Yeah, you can hear that. They're loving it. I can't quite see which car they are loving the most, but nice atmosphere here now that the sun is shining on the Ile Notre Dame. But what are your main takeaways from that session? It's a tricky one to read, isn't it, Harry?
It is. We've just seen there are a few momentary yellow flags out in the last few seconds. We've just seen the reason why. Bottas doing a lovely spin across the grass. Verstappen having to cut the chicane at turns 8 and 9. And Tsunoda doing the same thing. And as soon as they cut across the grass, they get, well, the camera at least, the onboard camera gets an absolute face full of water. So there is still a lot of water being retained off the racing line. I think this is going to be a tricky weekend now, because we have got these kind of mixed conditions forecast for the whole weekend, Rosanna. So drivers are going to have to go out on track and get used to them, whether it be wet, whether it be drying. I think that bodes well, though, for an exciting Saturday in particular for qualifying.
Yeah, I think FP2 is going to be an interesting one a little later later on. These dark clouds are hovering away in the distance. Will they be here for the second practice session? I'm not sure. Beck, have you enjoyed what you've seen in this first hour of running? Or first sort of, what do we have, 34 minutes or something?
It's definitely been interesting, and it's an interesting order. I agree with Harry. If this was qualifying, we're up for a great race, aren't we? Yeah, as you say, more rain for FP2. I mean, I personally don't ever read too much into FP1, no matter what the conditions. But it was good we got some cars on track, but I don't think we can read too much into it, can we? Am I just being a bit of a misery guts on that one?
No, not at all. Is Andrew furiously writing and scribbling away after that session? Or is he
you know he is, Rosanna. You know he is.
I know he is. Well, I'm just wondering what he's sort of using as the top line from that one.
He'll tell you now.
It's a straightforward P1 report, Rosanna, is who was fastest. So there you go. Work it out for yourself. This is not pure surprise material. I can tell you that right now.
You're a wordsmith, a lyrical genius. Benny, I'll let you get back to what you do best. Well, look, that is FP1. We will meet again for FP2, 5 to 10.
Don't be late, Rosanna.
Oh, well, look, guys, I'm here now. Let's hope they don't lock the island again. I might never leave. Look, it's been an interesting morning, or an interesting afternoon as well. Hopefully we'll get a bit more action in FP2. Hopefully the rain stays away so we can try and get a little bit of an idea as to the pecking order for this weekend. Harry, Beck, Andrew, thank you very much for talking us to FP1. Join us, as I say, at 5 to 10 on the BBC Sport website for FP2. Lando Norris then, fastest of anyone. He's just pulled in front of me in FP1. Can he do it again in FP2? Join us then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.